We like to think food is harmless once it's on the plate. These cases prove otherwise. From meals meant to impress to foods believed to be safe, this 5 cases ends the same way. Death triggered not by poison, but by eating exactly what was served. It was August 3rd, 2016, at a night market in Penang, Malaysia. Warm air hung heavy with fruit, sugar, and diesel. Fluorescent bulbs hummed above plastic tables. Vendors shouted promotions. Crowds pressed shoulder to shoulder, and phones stayed raised as food changed hands beneath canvas tarps throughout the narrow lanes. Most people at the Penang port recognized Ahmad Ismail, 41, by his voice before his face. He worked long shifts coordinating cargo amid engine noise and heat, relying on stamina rather than routine medical care. He rarely missed a workday and measured his health by whether he could stay on his feet through each shift. Checkups were often postponed, and flagged blood pressure readings were treated as inconveniences rather than warnings. He rarely drank alcohol and often bragged about tolerating heavy food without trouble. Co-workers knew he sweated easily and kept headache tablets in his pocket. Mandatory health screenings flagged high blood pressure more than once, but he signed the forms and returned to the loading bays. Records later showed repeated elevated readings above 160 systolic. That evening, a night fruit market advertised an eat-all-you-can durian promotion for $5, framed as harmless endurance fun. Customers were encouraged to participate openly. Ahmad stepped forward willingly. Durian is calorie-dense, high in natural sugars and fats, and places acute strain on digestion and circulation when consumed rapidly. Over the course of about 25 minutes, he consumed nearly 6 fruits that weighed almost 8 pounds. His hands grew slick, his shirt darkened with sweat, and his breathing became heavy. The stall owner recorded him beforehand for promotional purposes. To cut the taste, Ahmad grabbed a 20-ounce cola and drank it quickly, laughing as he finished. No staff intervened. There were no posted warnings about moderation. Ambient temperatures were above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, the crowd tight, and excess was rewarded with attention. Ahmad wiped his face repeatedly, but waved off concern from nearby customers. Confidence carried the moment, and the atmosphere stayed casual. Minutes later, his posture changed. His expression tightened and his movements slowed. As he attempted to stand, his body hesitated mid-motion. His right arm dropped and the left side of his face slackened. He tried to respond to someone nearby but could not form words. He collapsed backward into stacked crates and fell to the ground. His legs stiffened briefly, then went loose. Emergency services were called immediately. The camera captured the moment he went down, showing loss of balance, followed by collapse, but no one recognized the severity of what was happening at first. His breathing became irregular and shallow. Saliva and airway fluid pooled at his mouth rather than foam from the lungs. His skin flushed, then dulled. Confusion filled the space where urgency should have been as the market noise continued around him. Within minutes, his chest stopped rising, his jaw loosened, and his body went still. Paramedics arrived shortly after, but Ahmad was already unresponsive. Attempts to revive him failed. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner determined the cause was a massive brain bleed caused by uncontrolled high blood pressure. Rapid sugar intake, caffeine, heat, and physical strain triggered a sudden spike, rupturing a vessel deep in the brain. Blood flooded areas, controlling breathing and movement, causing immediate and irreversible damage. Years of untreated hypertension had thickened his arteries, and a distended stomach from fruit and soda increased internal pressure. Death followed within minutes, beyond the reach of medical intervention. Authorities ordered the stall closed and banned unlimited durian promotions across the market. The recordings were removed after public backlash. Inspectors cited failure to manage crowd safety and health risk awareness. His death became an internal case study on ignored health risks, documented quietly and filed away. Ahmad's death came from excess, not ignorance. The danger built slowly and ended suddenly. In the next case, the food was small, the portion controlled, and the failure happened faster than anyone expected. It was November 14, 2017, inside a late-night conveyor sushi bar in Osaka, Japan. Students filled the narrow room after classes, coats draped over stools. Plates moved steadily along the belt, tea steamed quietly, and conversations overlapped. Staff worked routinely, refilling dishes, clearing stacks, and keeping the pace even steady. One of the diner that evening was Keiko Mori, 23 years old, and nearing the end of her hospitality studies, balancing classes with part-time shifts at a budget hotel where she rotated between the front desk and breakfast service. She saved carefully for overseas internships and rarely missed a shift. She was dependable, detail-focused, and quietly competitive, someone who struggled with backing out once attention turned her way. Friends saw her as capable, but easily embarrassed, especially in public situations. She had been diagnosed with mild asthma as a child, mostly triggered by cold air or strong odors. Over time, the symptoms faded enough that she stopped carrying her inhaler regularly. In school, she was trained to stay calm under pressure, to maintain a pleasant expression regardless of discomfort. She took pride in managing situations without showing distress, particularly in settings where being watched mattered. The sushi bar she visited that night was known locally for informal food challenges. They weren't posted on menus, but staff tolerated them as long as things stayed lighthearted. One involved eating a golf ball-sized lump of pure wasabi, far stronger than what accompanied sushi plates. It was freshly grated and kept covered to maintain its strength. Employees knew it caused coughing and tearing, but assumed adults understood the limits. That evening, the restaurant was crowded and loud, with diners filming short clips of food and reactions. Keiko's friends brought up the challenge casually while scrolling on their phones. A phone was set up to record before she agreed. A staff member glanced over, saw laughter, and a phone pointed toward the counter, and moved on. No warnings were offered, and no one intervened. Keiko paused for a moment, then lifted the wasabi and swallowed it in one motion. Almost immediately, her face changed. Her eyes widened and filled with tears. She opened her mouth to breathe in, but nothing came through. A reflexive spasm closed the muscles at the top of her airway, locking it without any gradual warning. She grabbed at her neck, knocking plates off the counter. No sound came out, not even a cough. Her face flushed dark red, then began to purple. Tears ran down her cheeks as she leaned forward, chest rising sharply but pulling in no air. People nearby laughed at first, assuming she was exaggerating for the recording. Her lips darkened. Her hands shook, then lost strength. She slid off the stool and collapsed onto the tiled floor. She was still conscious, eyes open, but unable to draw a breath. The second recording, started moments earlier by another diner, captured her movements slowing, then stopping entirely. Confusion spread as people argued whether it was a prank or panic reaction. Emergency services were called once it was clear Keiko was not recovering. Staff repositioned her, but did not clear her airway. Paramedics arrived within minutes and found no pulse. Resuscitation continued during transport, but she was pronounced dead shortly after reaching the hospital. The post-mortem showed no obstruction, allergy, or toxin. Her airway was clear. The cause of death was acute laryngospasm triggered by exposure to concentrated wasabi during ingestion. Panic and underlying asthma prevented the airway from reopening, leading to rapid oxygen deprivation and cardiac failure. The restaurant was cited and barred from food challenges. Staff underwent emergency training. Her school later added airway response awareness to its curriculum. Keiko's airway closed without anything blocking it. No object remained to remove, no obvious mistake to correct. The next death involved the opposite problem, something ordinary, sharp, and lodged where it could not be ignored. It was March 19, 2014, inside a public senior community center in northern Ohio. The dining hall carried the smell of steamed vegetables and disinfectant. Trays moved along plastic rails, chairs scraped softly, and conversations overlapped at low volume. Fluorescent lights hummed above long tables arranged for routine, unhurried meals. Eleanor Finch was visiting the center that day. She was 78 years old, a retired public librarian who had spent 4 decades organizing information for other people. Her friends said she's organized, follow routines, and quiet courtesy. Even in retirement, she kept schedules written in pencil and volunteered twice a week at the senior center's reading room, shelving donated books and helping residents navigate large print catalogs without drawing attention to herself. She disliked causing interruptions and avoided medical complaints, treating them as inconveniences rather than concerns. Her dentures had never fit quite right. They shifted subtly during firmer bites, but Eleanor refused adjustments. She said she ate slowly, cut carefully, and had managed well enough for years. Staff knew this and often checked her plate, but she waved off concern with practiced ease. She took pride in not needing help. Dinner service that evening followed the usual schedule. Baked white fish was served with steamed vegetables and a soft dinner roll. The fish was labeled deboned. Eleanor sat at a regular table with 3 women she'd known for years. She spoke mid-bite, laughing quietly, posture relaxed. The room carried the steady noise of trays, chairs, and low conversation. There were no warnings posted, no special precautions announced. Fish night was considered safe and familiar. Staff moved between tables, refilling water and clearing plates. One aide noticed Eleanor talking while eating, but didn't interrupt. Nothing in the room suggested risk or urgency. The center's fixed security cameras had already recorded the dining hall earlier that evening as part of routine coverage. As Eleanor swallowed, a thin pin bone left behind during processing slid backward instead of down. It rotated upright and lodged at the opening of her airway. She stopped speaking mid-word. Her face tightened. She lifted one hand slightly as if asking for a pause. One of her friends leaned over and patted her back, assuming a simple cough. Eleanor tried to inhale. No air moved. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her chest rose without airflow. She pushed her chair back and stood, unsteady. The bone shifted deeper, sealing the airway completely. She took 2 steps before collapsing between tables, striking a chair leg on the way down. Staff reacted immediately as she fell. Emergency services were called without delay. Basic assistance was attempted, but nothing cleared the blockage. Her body lost tension quickly. Her lips darkened as oxygen dropped. A separate camera covering the serving line captured her collapse from a second angle, confirming the sequence already seen earlier. Paramedics arrived minutes later. By then, Eleanor had no pulse. Resuscitation efforts continued briefly, but showed no response. The obstruction was removed during post-mortem handling, not during treatment. The dining hall was cleared quietly. Dinner service ended early, trays left unfinished where they sat. The coroner's report described a single sharp fishbone lodged vertically at the top of the airway, acting like a plug. Air could not pass around it. Oxygen loss caused loss of consciousness in under a minute. There was no heart attack or stroke. She died from suffocation. The report noted that poorly fitting dentures likely reduced her ability to feel the bone and respond quickly. The death was ruled accidental. No negligence was assigned, though the recordings confirmed brief hesitation commonly observed in choking emergencies. In the weeks that followed, the center removed all bone-in fish from its menu. Staff completed additional choking response training. Eleanor's volunteer shift was reassigned without ceremony. A small plaque was mounted near the dining hall entrance, listing her name and years of service. Her donated books were boxed and stored for months before being returned to circulation, a quiet reminder that familiar routines can still fail when small dangers are dismissed as harmless. We're only halfway through. The remaining cases don't involve poison or sabotage, just food doing exactly what it's capable of. Consider subscribing if you want to see how much worse this gets. It was January 22, 2015, at a public high school in Seoul, South Korea. The cafeteria was loud and crowded, trays sliding across plastic tables, chairs scraping tile floors. Students talked over one another, phones raised casually, lunch staff moving between lines, routine noise filling the room during midday break. Sitting alone at one of the tables was Min-jae Park, 16 years old. His classmates described him as quiet and smart. He ranked near the top of his class and rarely drew attention. After school, he helped his mother manage accounts for her small restaurant, recording receipts and balancing handwritten notebooks. Teachers described him as reliable but socially unnoticed. He avoided conflict, moving carefully through crowded halls. That lunch period was no different. He sat where space opened briefly, surrounded by motion and noise that paid little attention to who occupied it. Long tables packed students close together. Lunch aides rotated through stations, each responsible for hundreds of teenagers at once. Surveillance cameras covered wide angles from the ceiling, recording movement without sound, as routine noise masked the first signs of distress. That day, a classmate brought oversized sticky rice cakes purchased outside the school grounds. They were dense, elastic, and made from pounded glutinous rice designed to be sliced before eating. During lunch, a group dared Min-jae to swallow one whole. Phones were raised immediately, framing his hesitation. He paused longer than usual, handling the rice cake briefly before lifting it, aware of the risk but unwilling to look weak. Rice cakes were a known choking hazard, especially when eaten quickly. Posters on cafeteria walls warned students to chew thoroughly. No teacher intervened. A nearby lunch aide glanced over, saw laughter, and turned away. The moment passed without correction. The pressure to perform outweighed caution, and the crowd sensed something worth recording. Min-jae placed the rice cake into his mouth. It resisted his teeth, stretching instead of breaking apart. Students leaned closer, voices rising. He forced it backward with a hard swallow. His throat moved visibly as the mass passed the tongue without fragmenting. The phones tightened their focus, waiting for either success or embarrassment. The mass slid past his tongue and lodged high in his throat. Saliva rapidly soaked into the surface. The rice expanded, forming a dense, rubbery plug that sealed his airway completely. Min-jae slammed both hands on the table. His eyes widened. Color drained from his face as airflow stopped. Laughter continued for seconds that mattered. Someone shouted encouragement. Min-jae stood, staggered, and collapsed sideways into the aisle. His chest heaved without sound. A lunch aide froze, unsure what she was seeing. Students backed away, still recording, as his legs stiffened and then went slack. Emergency services were called immediately. Attempts to dislodge the obstruction failed. The rice cake compressed briefly under force, but rebounded, maintaining its shape. Min-jae lost consciousness in under 40 seconds. Paramedics arrived minutes later. There was no clear airway left to open. The medical examiner found a single compact mass completely blocking the airway from the upper throat downward. Once wet, the rice cake conformed tightly to the airway walls, resisting removal. Oxygen never reached the lungs. The heart continued briefly, then failed as the brain shut down from lack of air. There were no underlying medical conditions. The footage circulated through the school before administrators intervened. Counseling was offered to witnesses, and recording devices were confiscated. Rice cake portions were restricted to bite-sized servings the following week. The policy change was formally documented as a direct response to Min-jae Park's death. Min-jae's death unfolded in seconds, driven by pressure and performance. The final case followed someone who believed knowledge prevented risk, until the environment responded in a way no explanation could stop. It was March 3, 2017, in a small residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Cebu City. The evening air was warm and still, the kind that lingered inside kitchens even after windows were opened. Inside a modest rented house, a compact private kitchen was lit by a single overhead bulb, its counters crowded with cutting boards, saucepans, and drying racks. 23-year-old Daniel Cruz had graduated from culinary school just 3 months earlier. He was newly licensed, recently hired as a junior prep cook, and eager to distinguish himself in a competitive field. Friends described him as meticulous and stubborn, especially when challenged. He followed recipes precisely, kept handwritten notebooks of experiments, and believed discipline could overcome most risks. Daniel had a known heart condition diagnosed during his final year in school. Doctors had cleared him for normal activity, but warned against extreme physical or physiological stress. He complied publicly, kept medication on schedule, and avoided heavy exertion. Privately, he believed he understood his body well enough to judge its limits. That evening, Daniel was working alone. He had been experimenting with ghost peppers, known for their extreme heat and high capsaicin content. His goal was to create a concentrated extract he could use sparingly in sauces. The process involved reducing pepper pulp over low heat, filtering solids, and further concentrating the liquid until only a small amount remained. The extract he produced was far stronger than commercial hot sauces. It was not intended for direct consumption. Daniel understood this, but curiosity and confidence overruled caution. He believed a controlled taste would tell him whether the extract was usable or excessive. No one else was present. No dilution was prepared. He dipped the tip of a spoon into the extract and tasted it. The reaction was immediate. Intense burning spread across his tongue and throat, far stronger than anything he had experienced before. He began sweating heavily within seconds. His breathing quickened as his body reacted to the sudden pain stimulus. He moved to the sink, rinsing his mouth with water, but the burning intensified instead of subsiding. Within minutes, Daniel felt nauseated. His heart rate increased sharply, pounding against his chest. Capsaicin does not poison the body, but it triggers a severe stress response, activating pain receptors and forcing the nervous system into overdrive. For someone with an underlying heart condition, the strain can be dangerous. Daniel attempted to sit down and regulate his breathing. His hands trembled as he tried to steady himself against the counter. Chest tightness followed, then dizziness. His heart rhythm became irregular as his blood pressure spiked. The pain from the extract continued, layered with panic as his body failed to stabilize. He collapsed onto the kitchen floor. Emergency services were contacted later that evening after Daniel failed to respond to messages and a co-worker checked on him. Paramedics found him unresponsive. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. The medical examiner found no evidence of poisoning, contamination, or substance use. Toxicology tests were negative for drugs and alcohol. The examination confirmed a pre-existing cardiac condition and signs consistent with acute cardiovascular stress. The cause of death was determined to be cardiac arrest triggered by extreme physiological stress following ingestion of a highly concentrated capsaicin extract. The heart had entered a fatal arrhythmia. Under strain it could not recover from. Investigators documented the homemade extract still on the kitchen counter. Its concentration was far beyond typical culinary use. The death was ruled accidental. Daniel's case was later referenced informally in culinary safety discussions, particularly among instructors who warned students about self-testing extreme ingredients and ignoring medical limitations. No regulations changed as a result. The kitchen was cleaned, the equipment removed, and the house rented again. The experiment ended where it began, alone, undocumented, and irreversible. Thank you for watching. For more videos like these, click here.